Hello everyone that's watching. My name's Catherine, so I'm Head of Policy and Public Affairs at Catch22, and I'm just going to be helping out moderating the workshop today. I'm going to pass over to Matt in a minute to introduce everyone and to introduce the workshop, but just a couple of quick housekeeping points. So just to say, as with all of the sessions, if you've been 20 so far, the session's 45 minutes long. We're going to stick to time as closely as we can. So I guess if you've got any questions, if you could just pop them in the chat. It's the session Q&A on the right hand side of your screen, and just make sure that you are in the session tab and not in the event tab, otherwise your question will be seen by the whole event. And then I will put your questions to the speakers at the end of the session if we have time. If you do really want to ask your question live on screen, you can ask to share your audio and video, and I will do my very best not to mess it up and to enable you to do that. But again, just depending on time. And you can also use the thumbs up icon to upvote a question if it's something that you're also keen to ask as well. And if you'd like to follow up on a question, please write on your question that you want to. It is a follow-up, basically. So without rambling on anymore, I'm now going to pass over to Matt to introduce himself and all the other speakers. Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Randle. I'm Assistant Director for Catch22, working in our Justice Division. Today, we've got a presentation which looks at the different approach that Catch22 Justice takes with working towards supporting those involved with serious youth violence and those at risk of gang involvement. I think before we start, it's probably worth noting that within wider Catch22, we work on a wide spectrum of services, of which there'll be various different touch points and involvement with people that are involved within serious youth violence or involved in gang involvement. But today we're particularly focusing on our justice approaches and our specialist services that we've created over the last 11 years, which are tailored towards supporting young people and young adults that are at risk of serious youth violence. So today we've got going to be sharing our experiences from 4 of our different areas, which looks at prevention, intervention, exit, and also the support that we do for victims of gang involvement. So hopefully can share a bit of our experiences, that what we see from our service delivery expertise, and then in particular how we've seen the impact of COVID over the last 12 to 15 months and how that has played out within the sector as well. So if you could just move on to the next slide. Okay, so I guess overarching where we see our strengths to our approach is that we believe that we have an informed approach which is theoretically underpinned, and what we mean by this is that before when we're designing a service, we look at academia, we look at what research is in existence to look at ensuring that we've got a clear sort of underpinning to deliver our services. And where there are voids in that information, we would seek to identify or commission our own research. A really good example of that is in 2014, we commissioned a piece through our Doors Research Hub, which looked at the how gang violence spills into custodial settings, which then allowed us to build a model which is underpins our existing custodial gang services, which Simon will go to discuss with you again. But it's understanding how academia and frontline delivery can be combined to ensure the best, most effective service delivery model. What we also look at is how we ensure that whatever service that we're delivering, it's tied into that local context. We understand that sort of serious youth violence in gangs are an international issue, but there'll also be regional differences as well. And that's not just on a country by country basis, but what we see that is what works in London may not work in the same areas in rural areas of the country. So ensuring that whilst we have a model, ensure that we have that local context and we're continuously informed by best practices and sort of what research is available out there to ensure that it's relevant for the area that we're going to be doing. And then I guess tying into that is our evaluation. So we've got a strong approach to how we evaluate what works and ensuring that we're continuously self-evaluating. And so within all of our services, we have a suite of different metrics on how we can sort of quantify what impact the services are making and look at how we can build that evidence base. And examples of that is how we have distance travel tools, which really sort of capture that the impact that we've been able to make to those service users' lives, and particularly on addressing risk factors or support on tailored towards that gang involvement or that risk of serious youth violence. And then I guess sort of moving on to the service user voice, and that I know that James will be discussing this a lot more in depth today, but ensuring that when we're designing a service or as the service is evolving, that we continuously have that service user voice throughout. And I guess one of our main aims is to do this is have a co-design to ensure that whatever service that we're delivering is personal to the audience. There's no point in us designing a service which isn't engaging with the young people and isn't receptive to the people that we're trying to deliver these key messages to. And then I get to the relationship. So whilst the different approaches that we have, they're all sort of focused on a relational model. And by that, what we mean is that we have the opportunity to build rapport with the young person, having that sort of case management approach to working with people to deliver those messages in a way in which will be engaging and understood by the young person. So we're just going to move on quickly into discussing about COVID-19 and how our frontline services have seen the impact of that. Again, my colleagues today will be giving this on a service by service basis, but just as an overview where we've seen some of the impacts over the last sort of 12 months, I think it goes without saying, invariably, serious youth violence, you know, certainly over the beginning of COVID, there was a downward trend in reported incidents. And I think our view is that there's more circumstances of the environment, that there's the lack of opportunity, but actually the root cause is what caused people into serious youth violence or gang involvement have actually deteriorated since COVID. And below are just some examples of where we've seen that factors which contribute towards that. So I think the first one is in regards to unemployment and poverty. We know that lack of opportunity or lack of purposeful sort of activities is one of the main drivers within people to be involved in pro-criminal lifestyle. But young people, I know there's been various different talks through the Euromet talking about how young people have been disproportionately impacted by the economic downturn that's been a consequence of COVID. But then when you start correlating that with other sort of disproportionalities that exist, such as ethnicity, there's a direct correlation. For example, within the young black male population has been 40% unemployment since COVID. And when we start to contextualize that is a similar rate to what we saw when the Brixton riots existed. You can start to see and how that could be a significant concern as to a spike of involvement in pro-criminal activities. And what we're also seeing is where there's been family poverty or unemployment through COVID. So what we're hearing from our delivery is young people are telling us that due to their mother or father losing their income, that they found a role that they have to provide for the family, and that some of them have turned it into sort of illegal activities to provide income to the family. The next part, and I think again it's been heavily focused on Euromet, is that greater exposure to online harm. So we know, everyone throughout society has probably been relying on the internet over the last 15 months more than ever to do socialise, to do their work, to be engaging with their peers. But we know that there's a significant amount of harms attached to the online world, and especially in the serious youth setting. We know that social media has been a catalyst for youth violence and has been for a number of years, but the increased usage of online, the increased usage will invariably mean that those negative attributes attached to that will have deteriorated. We've also heard that sort of criminal gangs are using social media and the internet as methods of recruitment more and more. Again, so we're hearing people getting groomed into sort of county line activities via their increased involvement in online harm. And again, sort of some of the negative attributes towards online goading, whether that's via sort of YouTube music videos. We think there'll be a greater exposure to them through increased usage of online harm. And again, some of my colleagues will give some examples of that later on. The next part is about domestic abuse and adverse childhood experiences. So we know that since COVID, it's been well reported that domestic violence within the household setting has increased, and therefore the likelihood of young people witnessing domestic abuse will have increased. Again, where this has been clearly mapped as being a risk factor to young people's involvement with serious youth violence. So again, we think that there's likely to be a consequence as a result of that spike also. And then lastly, before I hand over, is in regards to reduction in pro-social engagement. So where young people were engaged in sort of mainstream activities before, whether that's school, whether that's sort of extracurricular activities, that through the lockdown, some of those pro-social guardians of society have had a less exposure to some of these young people's lives. So whether that's sort of less safeguarding sort of concerns will be flagged as a result, but also the fact that things like youth clubs or community mentors or other people in society that or sports organisations have had less exposure to those at risk of serious youth violence and gang involvement, and therefore the risk, the pull factors of sort of pro-criminal lifestyles have probably been able to persuade people into sort of these lifestyles where maybe pre-COVID they would have had some pro-social sort of guardians or role models that could have kept them going in a positive direction. So I'll finish there, and I'm going to pass you on to some of my colleagues to give some examples from our frontline delivery as to what approaches they've taken and how they've seen the impacts of COVID impact their service delivery. Thank you. I'll pass you on to Joe.
Yep, so my name's Joe Raby. I'm going to talk to you today, sort of share a few projects that we run and talk to you about our prevention initiatives and the impact of COVID. I'm going to be talking to you in regards to our community-based service in Wolverhampton that supports sort of 10 to 17-year-olds at risk of being drawn into or harmed by gangs and associated violence. So first of all, then, in terms of raising awareness, just to talk about practitioner training. So we deliver county lines, gang awareness, knife crime, and we're currently developing a What is UK drill training. The focus of the training is different professionals understand definitions, models of operation, warning signs, approaches, prevention and intervention, so that they can effectively support or signpost the young people to relevant services and build their confidence when discussing these topics. So recently we delivered to a housing authority who has since called multiple times to discuss sort of potential cases. So it shows the impact of that in the local community and to help referrals as well. So with the family and school engagement, so how we do this is phone calls, one-to-one sessions, texts, emails, sort of arrange different ways of contacting them. We tend to do this with parents and guardians of young people to help upskill them and build confidence when questioning young people's actions. sort of telling the relevant people of safeguarding concerns so that we can help promote the contextual safeguarding approach. So we sort of tap into to upskill those parents and guardians. The reason we do this is because obviously parents and schools are gatekeepers, and their influence on protective factors is really big. So we might work with a young person once a week for a couple of hours, which is a tiny percentage. Therefore, if we can build resilience and help develop the interfamilial relationships, then this can help prevention. And risk management. So we attend numerous meetings with the local authority, so that could be youth offending, education and partnership agencies, to feed into their plans and actively risk manage the young people we work with through a multi-agency approach. So through COVID, obviously there's been greater exposure to online harms, which Matt has already talked about. So, you know, this includes that peer pressure, the goading, the pro-criminal messaging. So what it has done, it's resulted in more young people becoming involved and or further in. For example, with the easing of lockdown, we've seen a rise in planned violent offences, especially at schools, due to virtual communication being misinterpreted or young people actively calling each other out, which forces the hand of others to respond. So with the lockdown we came out of around sort of September, October time, we had an incident within a local school where sort of 6, 7, 8 young people were involved in it. There was quite a lot of violence, and it was off the back of obviously them talking online, you know, being involved in sort of drill music or bits and pieces, goading each other. And then when it came to sort of restrictions, it blew up a little bit in the school context. So it's just something that we want to be aware of at the moment. So engagement strategies then. So prevention is a continuum, and offering alternatives to a particular lifestyle is key. So although we might be limited in some aspects, let's help create options around activities, hobbies and relationships to demonstrate that small changes can make a big difference. So an example of this in relation to COVID would be, we've created a virtual delivery plan over the last few months. So we provide resources and competitions with young people. So for instance, 1 week we'll do a resource, so we'll send a YouTube video, sort of a worksheet or questions and things like that. So we try to detach it a little bit from school, so it's not added work in that sense, but it's something they want to be engaged with. And then the following week we'll do competitions. So we'll get them to send pictures of something they've cooked, poems. We'll ask particular questions as well. You know, there might be things that pop up in the news that we want to engage with the young people. You know, we'll speak to them about knife crime, ask them what their views are, county lines and things like that. So one of the a main one that sticks out to me was one of the project workers was working with a young person and asked, you know, what would you do if no one would judge you? So that was the question for the week. We asked all the young people. Young person came back to us and said, because it's fun, it's competitive, but they're not the correct target audience, they think. So it's one of those where, you know, actually we're a little bit limited in terms of the work that we can do with the young people during the midst of COVID. But actually, you know, could we provide a chess board? Could we get them to play that at home? Could they be, you know, could they play it with a project worker? Could they play it with a family member? And, you know, Thursday night they get a text, do you want to come out? Do you want to go do something in the local community? They could be halfway through a game with their dad, sibling, guardian, whatever, and it might sort of stop them from doing it that particular night. So it's being creative and working with that, especially during COVID. And another thing as well, a little bit more around online harm. So we had a request from a local academy of schools, who said, right, online harms is a real thing at the moment. We're really struggling with it over the last couple of months. Young people are using sort of TikTok, all the different social medias. We're losing it a little bit. It's getting away from us. We don't entirely understand it. Some of the parents are asking questions and they're struggling a little bit with it at home. So we put sort of bespoke training together for 8 to 10-year-olds and parents and guardians. So it was all virtual. They'd log on with the parent and guardian and we'd go through training. It'd be explaining the harms and how to use sort of social media. Also, you know, saying the fact that, you know, a lot of these social medias can be positive as well, and they can be good, but it's just obviously giving them the information so that they can stay safe, you know, contracts, bits and pieces like that, with quizzes, and it worked really well. And that was in response obviously to what schools have been seeing with COVID and the ramp up of virtual sort of delivery as well. So moving on to our structured intervention. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of these then. So the first one is our anger and emotions program. So it's a 6-week program that covers self-esteem, anger management, how to behave in class, how anger affects the body and the consequences of anger. This is typically delivered to primary school students between the ages of 8 and 11. And they're young people who are displaying anger towards staff or other children, and they've been identified by the school. The reason we do this is to help identify young people, help young people identify any triggers and coping strategies, to help them understand they're safe in school and to prepare them for secondary school and to interact with others without the use of violence. So really that prevention work there, moving into secondary school. Secondly, then, is our perception versus reality, which does link into COVID, because that's sort of when we created it over the last few months. So it's a 45-minute delivery that looks at the perception versus reality of the trap star and gang lifestyle. I created it with a couple of colleagues, and one of them is speaking in a few slides' time, James. And it was basically, it's aimed at 13 to 18-year-old young people who might have started to display certain behaviours, use gang signs, drug use, increased drug use, glamorization of the lifestyle. So we've been thinking about it for a little while, but there was a conversation that James had with a young person where it demonstrated sort of misinformation from the young person's point of view. So basically, a 12-year-old that he was working with mentioned that they can get alcohol in prison at Christmas as a reward, and that they want to go in prison for the rest, for a bit of rest and come out when they're 18. So, we can all understand why that's worrying. And it was a conversation that we had, which then sparked sort of this reality versus perception, look at to try and fill the gaps and help the young people understand, the reality of the lifestyle and give them as much information as possible. The rationale behind it is that, we want to give them options and knowledge. We're not directly saying do not get involved in the lifestyle, but we aim to plant the seed of doubt so they make an informed decision, and then we can work with them to sort of, have a change, make a change, and go for that pro-social sort of activities and a change in thinking. So lastly then, prevention is not just a 6-week workshop or planned intervention, but understanding strong relationships, including trust and honesty, form the basis of many behavioural programs. So helping to develop healthy relationships with consistent boundaries and trust will promote positive interaction. The old, saying of prevention is better than cure. I've outlined some of the structured intervention we use through our prevention work stream. The next slide will expand on further examples of group intervention used across the gang cluster. So Simon's going to talk about that now. Thank you very much.
Hi guys, my name's Simon. I manage the Gangs and Violence Reduction Service at H&B Thameside. So I'm going to go through the intervention work that we do and how COVID has impacted our service and how we've adapted to it. ROAD is our main group intervention, used predominantly in custodial settings, but has been adapted for use in the community. Following the introduction of the gang service at Thameside in 2013, ROAD was created shortly after in a response to a needs analysis and service users' feedback. The aims and objectives of this is that the program encourages participants to think and evaluate their past choices and address the consequences of their behaviour. ROAD focuses on reducing pro-criminal attitudes and offers alternative ways of thinking, providing examples after the aims such as pro-social attitudes by challenging negative views and exploring consequences to behaviour and improving communication skills to develop perspective and taking empathy. One second. The program is also here to underline group offending focus, but is suitable and offered to all regardless of gang membership, proved useful in bringing different experiences to us and discussions in regards to tasks. We have a success rate and we have examples of that, with 76% of our participants that completed the program improved or maintained positive behaviour 8 months following the completion of the program at Feltham. At Thameside in 2019, world completion was completed at a rate of 90%, and 89% of the participants demonstrated an improvement in their behaviour following the completion of the program. Further to this, there was a 24% increase in participants that reported no intention of carrying a weapon in the community following the program, indicating a positive shift in attitudes. You might ask yourself why it was successful. We had strategies and tools that we used. So we looked at interactive role play, looking at videos, visuals for them to interact with, the use of peer mentors, constructively challenging negative mindsets. And if I'm honest with you, is to keep it real, having those honest conversations about perceptions versus reality. On top of that, I think what was very crucial about the engagement was that it wasn't just coming from one way. So it wasn't staff just trying to get information from the service users, but staff also sharing maybe their experiences or things that they could have related to in their experiences. So that provided a good level playing field and a good balance in terms of them getting to know the staff that are delivering the work and vice versa. As our service is located in a prison establishment, the gangs team had to close operationally. Service users no longer had access to one-to-one engagement or group work, as well as being unable to engage in education, social, gym activities, as the prison regime had to follow government guidelines to ensure the safety of staff and service users. This also included the introduction of social distancing and PPE. The impact of the risk was very minimum in terms of violence. However, many service users found it difficult having the restrictions required in full effect. This caused the risk of coping mechanisms dealing with well-being, mental health, and isolation, and not being able to see family through visits. This is something that may also impact service users post-COVID, including interaction socially and self-esteem. We were able to adapt our way of working due to HMP Thameside having the technology to reach out to service users in cell, where we was able to conduct relevant checks via telephone to ensure all current and new service users, conflicts and safeguarding issues had the opportunity to be identified and documented. Other than this, service users were also informed that they could reach out through an in-cell messaging system if anything had to arise or anything in regards to the pandemic situation. This also helped prison staff to facilitate and be aware whilst the lockdown was in full effect, and also have the notion to know the confidence was there to be aware of any potential conflicts or gang affiliation. It was not in place. If this wasn't in place, it would have led to service users being put at risk on induction wing and located directly with their conflicts, whilst being on the same wing, creating further issues within a prison establishment. To ensure we cater to their needs of our service users post-COVID, we must ensure all our services are up to speed operationally, and we support service users by identifying their needs and ensuring that required support is in place, as well as working closely with the stakeholders and partnership agencies such as safer custody, security, healthcare, to risk manage any issues or service users may disclose. In the next slide, alongside group interventions, we engage with individuals in other forms of intervention such as mediation, one-to-one work, casework, when they're in a settlement period of their last 3 months. We explore and follow support in the community such as service users like the London Gang Exit and other strategies, which Aaron will talk about in the next slide.
Hello everyone, I'm Aaron Joy, the London Gang Exit Prison Link Coordinator. Today I'm going to provide an insight into our exit services and our approach. The London Gang Exit Service targets those aged 16 to 24, male or female, located in any of the 32 London boroughs and are affected by gangs or youth violence. The Wolverhampton Violence Reduction Team targets those aged 18 to 30, male or female, located within Wolverhampton and are affected by gangs or youth violence. To highlight why these services are important, I have pulled some statistics regarding reoffending in the UK. 62,059 offenders were released in the UK between April 2019 and March 2020. 27,025 of these offenders released were recalled in the same period. This is over a third of all those released in that year. Also during that period, 38.5% of all young offenders in the UK aged 10 to 17 years old were recorded as reoffenders. These stats may have reduced during the past year due to COVID, reducing the amount of criminal opportunities. However, to continue this decline in offending, this demonstrates why these services are key to providing support to those who are on the cusp of reoffending and the importance of showing an alternative pathway, especially considering the current pandemic situation, as those that have been in custody will have many more anxieties regarding the world they're coming out to, as most of them may not have a new way of life and will have to adapt to it. So our service aims, the reduction of risk in pro-social alternatives. The aim of our service is to identify the people of which are most at risk and provide them with the skills and support to reintegrate them to the community, keep them on the right track and reduce their rates of reoffending or becoming a victim. It is important to us as services to identify the complexities of the term gang when doing this work, as many young people do not see themselves in this light, are unable to identify the blurred lines of being a victim as well as a perpetrator and gang affiliated. With our safety planning and offending behaviour work, we can address these mindsets and ensure that the young people we are working with are aware of the risk posed to them and have the support, skills and coping mechanisms to reduce this risk. But this ain't always going to be easy, as many looking to leave this lifestyle behind will have many barriers due to such things as having friends or family still active in the gang, having the temptations of being able to make easy money, which especially right now, a lot of people are struggling with COVID, it's an easy look. Having previous conflicts due to old affiliations, the possibility of not receiving a good level of education, not having a suitable place to live, possibly having an unstable upbringing, or having unidentified poor trauma or poor health due to previous incidents. This stresses the importance of a good working relationship we must build with a service user, as to address these issues they may need to feel comfortable at first and not overwhelmed. This is important as some of the content that is discussed may open old wounds or may not have been addressed before. So our approach to engage, motivate and empower. Within the last 12 weeks, the pre-release resettlement stage, we would aim to visit the service user in custody and begin to plant the seeds for a good working relationship. Due to the current pandemic, we have had to adapt how we do this by using alternative methods such as using in-cell phones, video calls or messaging systems. By continuing service as usual and creating a rapport with the service user at this stage, it builds trust and may reduce some pre-release anxieties as we're able to address some of the main issues that may be coming up on release, such as housing or being unsafe to report at probation officers that prove to be a risk. And since we know this, we can target it before it becomes a more present issue. On release, the service would look to offer holistic support over a minimum 6-month intervention period. The support is offered from a trauma-based approach as weekly one-to-one sessions in a location that is safe and accessible for the service user. This is another key thing we have had to adapt in line with current guidelines due to not being able to meet most service users face-to-face. To address this, we began to conduct video call one-to-one sessions and provide support, information and work packs through online engagement mediums or post. We provide support with ETE, Health and Wellbeing, family support, one-to-one support and mentoring, housing advice and advocacy, as well as providing specialist support for girls and women. We provide support by creating an individually tailored action plan with the service user and believe it is important for the service user to be involved in the creation of his own action plan. With the use of the outcome star system, the service user is also able to monitor and score their progress with this plan, which can be an added motivation. This is key as when someone's re-entering the community, they will have a lot to adapt to and may find things overwhelming at first, which could lead to disengagement. So beyond structured intervention, our approach is tailored to the individual needs of the service user, and the management of risk is key. For some of our young people, the risk of harm is imminent. We have cases where 20 to 30 members of a conflict gang have turned up at a young person's address with weapons, and in this scenario, we had to get the young person moved into alternative accommodation quickly. And then there is the longer term interventions, such as work around trauma, identity, and accessing ET and family support work. We did not achieve this with a typical structured approach, as we realized that every service user may have different imminent risks or needs compared to others. This may also reflect an engagement length that is needed as everyone is different. In our experience, success is largely influenced through the relationships we are able to build and sustain. In the next section, James will discuss use of our lived experience to support this.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's James. I work for Catch-22 Violence Reduction Unit in Wolverhampton. And we work with young people who are involved or at risk of being involved in gang culture. And this is a world I know all too well, having spent 16 years, given 16 years to this lifestyle, and having made my escape and going through various different jobs, I pondered and reflected on the 16 years I'd wasted. And one time I thought, you know, maybe the 16 years wasn't a waste. Maybe I could use it to come back and help some of the young people who are about to set off on a path that I once did. Having looked around at where I could get into this field of work, Catch-22 then gave me the opportunity, first as a sessional worker, then becoming a project worker. And what I wanted to really achieve in this work was showing the young people the reality of these choices and lifestyle, as opposed to the perception of how the social media and music kind of sells you the dream. Out of this, me and my manager Joe, as explained earlier, came up with the reality versus perception virtual program, which takes young people on a journey through the consequences and the realities of such lifestyle. I have a small caseload of young people, and I'll, after a referral has been made, I'll go out to meet a young person. I'll sit down with them, work out what their interests and likes are, and then we'll tailor a session to suit them, whether that be the gym or a game of golf or pool. We use service user feedback forms and outcome stars to try and capture the effectiveness and the impact that we have on the young people, which obviously is the main goal. Instead of just sitting around chatting, obviously we want to make sure that we are having an impact on the young people. How lived experience really helps in this field of work for myself really is being able to bridge the gap. So bridging the gap between professionals and organisations such as social care, teachers, parents, people who don't quite understand that world. People, this world's quite, it's alien to them. They don't understand what their children are listening to, be it drill music, what they're absorbing through social media. Having the experience of this lived life is I'm able to reach out. And there's a case of a young person and his dad kind of at his wit's end couldn't understand why his son was displaying such violent behaviors, and I was able to sit down and really break down what his son was really absorbing drill music. I was able to explain that to him, and and he was quite surprised and shocked of what his son was kind of taking in. So yeah, bridging the gap between worlds has been quite through lived experience has been very helpful. Our approach incorporates the learning from lived experience. Alongside this, we draw on our expertise across the organisation. For example, the work of our victim services particularly have enabled further consideration of the victim-offender overlap, the link between victimisation and the perpetration of crime. Tamara and Tamara will provide an outline on the victim services in the next slide. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you for listening. I'm Tara, I'm one of the senior case managers at the Hertfordshire Beacon. This is my colleague Tamara, who specialises in supporting children who have been a victim or at risk of child sexual exploitation. It's just a little bit about the Beacon Victim Care Team. So we are the victim service for Hertfordshire, and we provide support to victims aged 4 and up. The crime does not need to be reported to the police in order to receive support, and we support both recent and historic crimes. There's also no set time frame on how long we support victims. It's based on individual need. Our service does not receive many referrals for gang violence due to a lack of engagement from victims, which isn't uncommon. The support our service provides is the same for every victim. However, due to the nature of this crime type, we would adapt a more holistic approach, addressing the person as a whole, regardless of their previous experiences. We're aware of the victim offender cycle, and we focus primarily on them being a victim and what we can support them with. We would carry out a needs assessment and tailor a support plan to their individual needs, and we can provide support such as liaising with the police on the victim's behalf, providing emotional support and preparing victims for court. These are just a few examples of the support our case managers provide. Last year, we set up a pilot working in collaboration with the Specialist Crime Unit within Hertfordshire Police, as there was an increase in knife crime incidents in Watford. The pilot was put in place, and due to my specialism in gang and knife crime, I would attend an initial meeting with the victim alongside the police at the earliest opportunity to provide an independent service separate from the police directly to the victim. The aim is to engage victims at the earliest opportunity, providing them with the support they are entitled to under the victim's code of practice, which is something that they may not be aware of. And then from the police's perspective, the aim of the pilot is to keep a victim engaged throughout the whole criminal justice process, including court. A key point to mention about this pilot is that many of the victims may have also been an offender at some point. Therefore, this could act as a barrier to them accessing support. So the pilot aims to engage hard to reach individuals who may fall into this crime type. So I'm just going to hand over to Tamara, who's going to talk about her role around CSE.
So since August 2020, I have specifically been supporting children who are victims of sexual harm, child sexual exploitation, or at risk of this. We've had over 70 referrals since the project has begun, and many of these cases have been CSE based. The support therefore entails working on healthy relationships, good versus bad choices, spotting the signs and risks of CSE, realising they actually are a victim of CSE, and also how to keep safe if they are continuing to participate in this type of exploitation. So just an example of a case study that we've seen ourselves here at the Beacon is of a 15-year-old female being exploited by a 19-year-old male. She was forced to have sex with himself and his friends and was given alcohol and lifts in return for these sexual favours. The outcome of this support has been positive, working on dealing with the CSE she experienced and flashbacks of the crime, but it has taken a long time for the victim to come to terms with what happened and talk about her ordeal. Since the pandemic, we've had to adapt our service and support our victims remotely through either phone or video call, and it has been challenging at times, but we have had to engage with our victims in a different way. We've also seen a large increase in online harms within our service, and we believe that this has increased due to the pandemic, with those hidden and unseen crimes happening on the internet and at home. James mentioned in the last section about the victim-offender overlap. In our experience, as outlined in the previous case study, careful consideration needs to be given to this concept to ensure the appropriate level of support is provided. You will have heard the different aspects of our approach to addressing serious youth violence throughout this presentation. Whilst our victim services do not sit directly within the gang cluster, the opportunity to share knowledge and expertise amongst colleagues is encouraged, and we've certainly seen the benefits in being able to share best practice in forums such as the Cross Hub Practice Sharing Workshop. And these discussions have been instrumental in informing our approach to intervention, enabling us to deliver holistic and high quality services to those that need them the most.
Great, thank you so much. I think that's, Matt, am I right in thinking all of the speakers have gone now? Great, I think that's a nod. We don't currently have any questions written in the Q&A box. I don't know if there's anyone who wants to either jump in now and I can bring you up on screen, or type something in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I might actually, we've got a few minutes left, so I might just kick off with a question myself, Matt, if that's okay. I just wanted to know if, kind of thinking about the past year and all the changes you guys have had to make because of COVID in your service delivery, which I know some of you have obviously already touched on, is there anything really positive that's come out of that that you want to take forward in the way that you're helping people once we come, if we ever do, once we come through the other side of the pandemic? I don't know who wants to take that one.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it's a really good question. There's definitely, I think obviously because these services, we're always busy, you know, we're always busy and we're always responding, and we do get a lot of referrals coming through and things. And I think the way in which we've had to be creative with some of the things that we've done, sort of, you know, like the virtual competitions and bits and pieces like that. So I think if there are ever situations where, you know, we might be struggling to engage a particular young person, we might be able to use some of the new things that we've been able to adapt and create over, like, so virtual delivery things. So if the young person that gets referred really struggles with sort of face-to-face, or wants to engage a little bit more through like a WhatsApp or something like that, we've had to do that more and more. So I think obviously we've adapted to it. We can speak to young people through different means, whereas beforehand it would just sort of be face-to-face, which ideally, and we want to do, and that's going to be the main bulk of the support we offer. But if there is sort of, you know, like a video call, which we probably wouldn't have done before, it's given us the opportunity to be able to offer that. So because obviously, you know, like FaceTime and bits and pieces, young people tend to be doing that more and more nowadays. So we can obviously adapt to that and speak to young people. So yeah, I think there's, from our point of view, and with the training delivery as well. So if we can do, for instance, one school, we've got some training booked in the next few weeks, and they're going to put us on the board, basically. So they're going to blow us up on the board, and so we can deliver it to the whole school, to the whole class. And obviously that helps with, you know, management of time as well. So if we can go in there and do a session, we potentially could do 3 or 4 sessions back to back, whereas if we did it in person, it might be a little bit different. So yeah, I think it's going to be from the point of view of service delivery, there'll be a bit of a mismatch, so we can offer things like that virtual as well as in person. So yeah, I think some positives.
Yeah, I think that kind of time-saving element has come up across quite a few of our services. So yeah, where staff don't have to spend loads of time sitting in a car necessarily going from place to place, they can actually spend more time kind of working with and helping young people. And I think, yeah, the digital side of things obviously definitely has its pros and its cons, but yeah, it's interesting to hear what elements people do want to take forward beyond the end of the pandemic. So it doesn't look like we've got any more questions through at this point. I hope it's all right to say, but I think Matt and his team are more than happy to answer any questions via email if you wanted to get in contact after the event. Yeah, I've no doubt they'd be more than happy to help. So do feel free to get in touch with us and follow up. But otherwise, all that's left is just to say thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much again to all of our speakers. It's never easy presenting, and especially with the digital tech thrown in as well, it can be a bit of a challenge. Well, for me anyway, apparently. So I think you guys have got sort of 15 minutes, and then if you head back to the main stage, it's the closing address will be on the main stage at 3:30. Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.